Welcome back to the On the Down Low podcast. And that is something I have missed saying for the past 3.5 months. And let me start by addressing the 10-ton elephant in the room. The last podcast episode I uploaded was May 25th. And let me just say, this has been an incredibly busy summer. And a lot of amazing things happened this summer. A lot of cool experience happened this summer. In all, had a lot going on, and this may sound like an excuse to some, and in a way it is. I had too much going on, and something had to give, and this is what gave. So I'm back now. Surprise, I'm back in school, my last year in school, but I surprisingly have more time now than I did this summer. Do with that what you will. Um, if you pay any attention to my On the Down Low Facebook, then you know that I made a post earlier this week saying that there is a lot of that I wanted to talk about. And there is a lot to talk about. There's way too many things happening in America in the past week and a half, 2 weeks, that should go unnoticed, and none of it should just go over the heads of specifically young voices. I'm a firm believer that if you have an intellect, you have strong information based opinions, you should use it for good. You should use it for informational purposes. You should use it for the ones that cannot put into words the things that they want to say. You should put it out into the world, put it out into the community around you, that you understand what's going on. You can be a shoulder to some people in whatever way that may be, emotionally, intellectually, politically, whatever it may be. It's important to show what you were capable of doing, because at some point in time, we are the next generation of American leaders. And it's starting, Gen Zers are almost getting to that point where they can get into political offices. Some of the older Gen Z generation can. And it's almost frightening for me as a 21-year-old. It's frightening for me to see that our generation is now going to start holding those positions, but a majority of the peers I'm around make important opinions based off of ignorance rather than information. And that is why I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. It is so important, if you have the intellectual capability, you need to use it for spreading factual opinions and being able to support your findings, being able to hold your ground. That is a horrible laxity in the 2025 world, in the 2025 narrative, specifically in America. You can say whatever you want, and rarely are you going to be asked to hold your ground. I want to change that, and I want to be able to, in some way, shape, or form. I don't know who's watching this. I have a good idea, but I don't know every listener that this will reach. And to someone that's maybe never watched this before, never watched me before, doesn't even know that I existed until now, if there's one thing I want you to be able to take away from listening to anything that I say, be factual. Everything you do and everything you ever will be, do it factually. Do it with intent, not ignorance. So that was a long intro just for me to say that I'm back and I have a lot that I want to talk about. And we're going to be focusing on the three big things that have happened recently. There's way too many to count, but I'm more so focusing on the ones that have a severe aftershock. And that's another thing I want to point out is I am not here to give you news information. I've said it whenever I do historical videos. I say it whenever I do anything of that sort where it's information spewing. I don't want the only thing you get from this to just be news quotes. Okay? I want you to be able to walk away from anything that I record and anything that I upload. I want you to be able to maybe feel like your opinion was challenged, or to maybe feel like what you're thinking was confirmed, that you were not crazy for thinking that. Or if you were questioning something that you were thinking about, you can walk away with a new platform of belief, new platform of questioning. You, in some way, are intellectually challenging yourself. I never want to be just another reporter of information that is well circulated. And by this point in time, I'm going to start by talking about Irana Verutska, the young Ukrainian girl who died on the train in Charlotte, North Carolina. I want to start by talking about her, then move on to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and then we will end with Jimmy Kimmel being taken off the air. So, a lot of information that I've said already in 7 minutes. So, without dragging it out any further, let's get into something that in the span of the past 2 weeks has caused me the most discomfort. The most discomfort in the way of American media failed this tragedy. And the only time that it was actually put out into mainstream media was not displayed correctly. There's a very chilling characteristic to this case that does not sit good with me. If you have, and I'm sorry if you have, like I have, watched this video of this young Ukrainian girl being stabbed, it's shocking, it's horrifying that this just happened out of nowhere. It we'll talk about what DeCarlos Brown, the suspect in this case, that we'll talk about the interviews that were conducted afterwards with his mom and his sister, and a potential motive that he may have had. But in all, this was a unforeseen, seemingly typical night, seemingly typical train ride for a young girl who was just simply trying to get from place to place. And it ended up becoming a media circus. It ended up becoming theatrical almost. It was finger pointing when finger pointing was not needed. We didn't even know what the girl's name was, and there was already political affiliations to each side. Starting off, and I said this, I don't want to dwell on media circulated information too harshly, but I will, for the sake of when it's appropriate, bring up quotes, bring up my opinions on interviews and what this means going forward. Like I mentioned, if you don't know the exact gritty detail of what happened, the basic rundown is Irina Verutska sat down in an empty row in a train in Charlotte, just outside of downtown Charlotte. And a man named DeCarlos Brown was in a red hoodie. It can be seen in the video, is in a red hoodie behind her. And in the video, you can see him pull out a knife, what appeared to be a knife. And then he kind of sits there for a while, kind of looks out the window, like that's all he's going to do. And then very quickly jumps up, swings over the front row, and stabs the young lady. And in the video, it's also very sad. She makes absolutely no sound. She makes not a scene. She just kind of slouches in her seat, grabs her face and kind of, her neck area. And it wasn't until it was too late that other people noticed, and huddled around her. The physical event of it itself is unsettling enough, but everything that's happened afterwards is even more unsettling. But something that s- made me kind of nauseous to think about was in an interview done, ironically enough, from ABC News, in an interview with his mom and his sister. Um, they stated that he suffered with mental health issues for years, and to also mention, because it's very important to talk about, this man had a very long criminal history and had 14 prior arrests, in addition to the mental health suffer that he had endured over the years. And it makes you wonder why a law enforcement guardian was not held closer to him, why he wasn't in a long term mental rehab facility. But instead, this happened. The laxity in the justice system in whatever case that he was held in is to blame for this tragedy. That is enough evidence, that is way more than enough evidence to show you that that man should not have been unsupervised, should not have been out on the street. And something else to add to the mental issue, he believes that he has a material in his brain, and whoever is facilitating, is orchestrating that material, is the one or the entity that made him kill this young girl. And in another interview I read, it was specifically with the sister, when she went to visit him after his arrest. I cut out some of the beginning portions of the conversation because it in basis was just them talking about why he did it, what happened, what are you thinking, what, the who, what, when, where, why. And this is where the conversation picked up, and something I want to focus on. In the interview, the sister said she asked why he did it. And he said, quote, "You and mama, y'all are being trafficked," end quote. The sister then says, quote, "Well, how are we being trafficked?" End quote. DeCarlos goes on to say, quote, "The government is trafficking y'all to get to me," end quote. And at the end of this article, the sister basically in all was saying that he was using this as a sign of self-defense. That he was using this conversation to show as a sign that he reacted in self-defense on that train. I don't know if there's any amount of context that will prove that to be true. There's no amount of context that will show that there was any malicious intent, that there was any foul play going on that train, and everything on an evidentiary basis is on the side of he is guilty. And to throw that into the mix when the media already has a well circulated that he is mentally unwell and should not have even been out on the street to begin with, it's not hard to see why President Trump is pushing for the death penalty. It is not hard to see why there's a lot of support behind that. It is not hard to understand why the laxity in our justice system is the direct result of tragedies like this. When you have a rap sheet that long, it is no question, and it should never be a thought in your mind for you to question why cases like this get punishments like this. So when I see arguments that no one deserves the death penalty, no one deserves, in any way, shape, or form, that capital punishment should not be even on the ballot for options. It's also the same people that are not educated in the cases themselves. That young lady didn't know that was going to happen. She did nothing. She didn't do anything. And the media reaction to this was actually more stunning to me than the ferocity of the case itself. The actual murder happened on August 22nd, but the footage from the train was not released until September 6th. Why it took so long, and why, when it did hit mainstream media, you saw headlines that were like, "Stabbing video fuels MAGA's crime message," and "Trump says Irana Verutska's blood is on Democrats' hands." So I am saying, by me adding that last headline, is me saying that the call is coming from both sides, both ends of the house. There is blood on the hands of the people that are making these foul, vague headlines, the immediate affiliation to a political party, and then it doesn't help that the president himself is saying that kind of stuff. There was a time, not that I've seen in my lifetime, that I've coherently remembered, where the president or Congress or anybody that is responsible for decision making in Washington, D.C., has acted with complete 100% belief that what is happening is humanity driven and not politically driven. And I bring this case up first because obviously Charlie Kirk's death, that was nothing but politically motivated. And it will never be anything but politically motivated. But this has no political tie to it. And the fact that when it did hit mainstream media, the only thing you saw was political affiliation. You should be able to report a tragedy, a horrific thing that is happening within one of the more dangerous areas of America. You should be able to report on it factually to how it's actually happening rather than immediately throwing someone else's party under the bus. And that goes for both sides, and that is why I bring up the latter of the two headlines. The last thing I'll say about Irana is the instant that something like this becomes a political theater and is no longer focused on the humanitarian portion of it, which at the end of the day is what it is. It is human against human. You can fluff it up as much as you want. It doesn't matter. The instant you make it into a political stage is the instant that it is no longer about this young girl that lost her life. It's not an argument of this girl losing her life. It's not an argument of this man who obviously had a troubled life, obviously shouldn't have been out on the street. It is no longer about the two that this should be focused on. It's now focused on DC. It's now focused on the nuanced things that do not matter. I mentioned at the beginning, but I want to say it again, is I don't want to dwell too heavily on news circulated information, especially regarding Charlie Kirk. But it is well worth talking about. It is well worth, no matter what side of the aisle you sit on, no matter your age, your demographic, it doesn't matter. This is a serious, serious, serious moment in American history. Not only for the sheer brutality of what happened, but the motive behind why it was done, and more importantly, the shockwaves that it sent through America just within 2 weeks. I've said it in previous episodes, but I really want to hit it. I want to drive it home now. You cannot ignore, and I believe I talked about this when I talked about vanity. You cannot ignore the hateful, vitriolic quadrant of humanity. We all have a hateful side in us. We all have a portion of ourselves, no matter the personality, no matter the ray of sunshine that you are, we all have it. It's baked into our DNA. Of course, there is a percentile of Americans that are wired a little differently, that get into the wrong groups, get into the wrong crowds, and it brings it all the way out. Where there is almost no longer a positive side, it's only pessimism. And I put this at the top of my notes because if there's one thing that should really be emphasized is that you can kill the messenger, but you cannot kill the message. And when you're a political activist like Charlie Kirk was, for as long as he was, it is seemingly unavoidable that his death was going to be anything but a political battle. It is sad that it can't just be stripped down to what you would have hoped to have seen from Similarly to Irana's case, you would have hoped that it would have been a human versus human argument. Of course, in this case, it was a little harder because of given the stance and given the activism that Charlie was involved in. Um, it's very, very disappointing what it's turned into. Masks weren't already dropped before his death; they are definitely gone now. And I implore and I beg of you to pay attention to the people around you, to pay attention what's being said by these people, by people maybe that you consider online influencers, people in your life, whoever. But please consider what that does to reflect your involvement in this. I said it at the beginning. There's one thing that you should just encourage yourself to do. And if you can encourage yourself, then go and encourage others, is to be a factual, somewhat level-headed, informational intellect. If you have the ability and the inclination, if every person could do that for themselves, we could reverse a lot of the harm that's being done in America. I've said it pretty vocally before. I intend on at least running for a political office in my future. I toyed with it for a long time, but the closer I get to actual eligibility, the more serious and the closer we get to inevitable doom in America, it's hard to turn and not want to do that. And I found a statistic. I am information based. If there's one thing that you will get from me is that I'm going to give you a statistic. I'm an engineering student. What do you expect? I found a pretty shocking statistic. This was taken in late 2024. Statistics show that politically motivated violence and harassment has increased 74% across the nation since 2022. 74%. And just in the past week in Washington, D.C., in D.C. alone, authorities have received over 9,400, quote, concerning statements and direct threats against Congress members. That is more than twice since 2017. Just in the past week. There was a time in America, not that I've ever seen it, there was a time in America, though, if I can't see it with my own eyes, I'm going to read of a time that it happened. I'm going to read of a time that this was something that obviously worked. But no one wants to learn about history anymore. That is one thing I've noticed. No one wants to learn history. History is so important. Political history is so important. And it cannot be turned away. And something that I wanted to also make another hitting point in this podcast is I made the title So Help Me God for a reason. Sounds familiar? That is the last line in government oaths of office. You can interpret it however you want, but what that's saying is you intend, to the best of your ability, to be truthful, ethical, faithful. You intend to execute the power of your office to the best and most ethical version that you can. And as a result, when you hear that and you think about it, why is that not just the expectation for all Americans? Why would you not want to be the best ethical version of yourself to the best of your ability? Why would you not want to be a light to other people? Why would you rather adopt I'll call it a beehive mentality? Think of a beehive. Bees are all within their hive. They don't need anything outside of the hive. And when you fall far enough into political arguments and to political opinions and just honestly just humanly opinions, we tend to find ourselves guilty of confirmation bias, direct result of a beehive mentality. That is on both sides of the aisles, people. Okay, it's not just one. And if you're sitting thinking to yourself after you just heard me say that, I was like, oh yeah, I know what side it falls on. You're the problem. Okay, you are the problem. It makes me so irritated whenever I hear a division of politics based on such limited information. When I hear constant dread from both sides and anything affiliated to the other side, and it's based on the same 2% of total sources available to you, I will not take you seriously. If you're going to say something, be factual. Be factual in what you say, be factual in how you portray yourself, and be factual in how you influence others. I kind of got off on a tangent there, but this is something that it really gets me riled up, and you can probably understand why. Is in America, after reading the last statistic that there in the past week alone has been over 9,400 threats and concerning statements made against the people that are holding office right now. Why I bring up the "So help me God" statement at the end of the oath of office, it's so heart shattering to think about the disconnect from humanity, the disconnect from basic human emotion. The disconnect has caused so much pain because no one a talks to each other. If you say something, no one's gonna probably tell you you're wrong. No one's ever gonna make you stand your ground. And people hate people like that. People didn't like Charlie Kirk because he was a true reflection of what the next generation of American politics was going to be. People didn't like Charlie because they knew that no matter what they did, he was more devoted and had more intellectual grit than they ever would. People tend to not like other people because they exhibit the qualities that they want. And when you live in in a society like America right now, you can say whatever you want, and if you argue it back, there's a chance you're going to be, quote, canceled or censored because you said something that was in opposition to them. Again, goes for both sides of the aisle. I do want to pick up on the thing I said before I kind of lost my train of thought. I mean, obviously, this is something I get pretty emotional about because it's what I'm going to be growing up in. This is the world I'm going to be an adult in. And it's my generation's responsibility to fix it, or we can watch it burn. I don't want the latter to happen. I believe in a place called America. I believe in a place called hope. I believe in a place where everybody can coexist, can colloquially have the same disagreements, have contentious debates that do not result in violence, that do not result in defamation. We cannot, no matter which way you twist it, no matter what you say you are, no matter what you think you are obligated to, we come here via birth and we leave via death. Human versus human. When it's sad that I have to say this, but when you strip away the political fact and any political strategy that someone may try to grapple from this, Charlie Kirk and Tyler Robinson was human against human. One person got killed because the other one didn't like what he said. And it's another portion I'll get into. Reading through the text exchange from Tyler and his roommate slash partner was one of the most head scratching things I've read in a long time. Because a part in there that really made me upset was the following snippet that I'm going to read to you. So I hopped in the middle, but I did not exclude any important context to the text conversation I'm about to read to you. Before this, leading up, if you haven't had a chance to read the full text exchange, I highly suggest that you do. Leading up to this, the roommate, Lance, asks Tyler, why did you do it? Why? Why'd you kill him? Tyler says, quote, why did I do it? End quote. Lance says, yeah. Tyler then says, I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out. Lance then says, how long have you been planning this? Tyler then responds, a bit over a week, I believe. And I shortened that text for brevity, because in the remainder of the latter half of that text, he's just talking about him trying to discard the gun and his plan to get away with it. A week. Think about how much you can accomplish in a week. Think about how much you can do, good or bad, in a week. If that doesn't make your stomach kind of hurt just thinking about it, in a week's time, a man that made a while controversial platform for some, expressed his political beliefs in a unapologetic, rightful way. This man that showed nothing but respect to people whenever they walked up to his microphones, did nothing but be an intellectual light, and became the true spearhead for what political activism needs to be. In a week's time, this young man decided he had had enough. In a week's time, a family lost their dad. In a week's time, a woman lost her husband. And something I want to make a comment about is the school shooting in the Colorado high school. And this one broke my heart to read. And this is the only comment I'll make about it. The authorities said that the gunman was a student, and the student who fired the revolver wasn't even old enough to drive. Between what I just read you from Tyler and that, you cannot look at me and say that gun violence is object only, that gun violence is only on the basis of the openness to obtaining these firearms. It's not. It's an issue that starts in the home. In some case, it's after they leave. It's after they go and they get out into the world and they do whatever. It is a people problem. And regulating those is not going to change how someone obtains a firearm. Just because you make it illegal, just because you make it more leaps and bounds and more hurdles for people to go through, they can still be obtained illegally. It's a people problem. It starts at the core of every person. The gun is not responsible for killing, it's the person that pulls the trigger. Again, the only comment I'll make about gun violence and the school shooting, and I'll give you my closing thoughts on Charlie Kirk. The best qualities you can equip yourself with is intellect, passion, and faith. Not in that specific order, but I say those are the three key milestones you need to use to judge yourself. And those who don't have those qualities, those who do not possess those qualities, will shun you and attempt to erase the sparkle, or attempt to erase your edge. Because if I said it earlier, because no one will despise you more in this world than someone who wants the things that you have. So, the last thing I want to talk about, and this is so non-serious in comparison to everything else we just covered. If you pay any attention, on September 15th, Jimmy Kimmel made in his September 15th monologue, made some comments, more so about Republicans than Charlie Kirk himself. More so, it was a dig at the current administration than anything else, and how I saw it. And if you haven't listened to it, to avoid copyright, you can find it anywhere. But here's some things I want to point out that he said. We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything more than one of them, doing anything they can to score political points from it. He then went on to comment about Trump, saying, "Who thinks like that? Why are we building a $200 million chandelier in the White House. Is it possible he's doing it intentionally so he can be mad about that instead of the Epstein list? It was announced a couple of days later that Jimmy Kimmel would be taken off the air indefinitely. So, not fired, not canceled, not any of that, just taken off the air basically until himself and in Next Star Broadcasting can get their guys under control. It's basically how that should have been interpreted, but it wasn't. And I mentioned earlier that if you're going to pay attention to influencers right now, pay attention to what they're saying. You know, they're always the first to speak about anything in Gaza, but I guarantee you a lot of influencers that you like, you follow, whatever, haven't said anything about Charlie Kirk, haven't said anything about what's going on in America, haven't said a single word. But I have noticed a couple of them that I follow that I think they're funny or I get entertainment from them have made the only comment they've made in even slight relation to Charlie Kirk is them expressing distaste for Jimmy Kimmel being taken off the air. That's another sign of this should have been a humanity versus humanity issue, not a Republican versus Democrat, or in this case, humanity versus insanity. Um, it should never have been that much of an issue. It should have been by this point in time, the world mourns and goes through the grieving process and respects him and respects his family and respects everybody involved and brings justice where needed to the correct parties. You would think that's how the typical justice system would work, and you would think that's how typical American media would work, but it's not. It's been everything but that. Anyways, back to Jimmy Kimmel. Like I said, this feels so silly to talk about now, considering everything we just talked about. The rest of America is in shambles. Yet, this is what a majority of celebrities, a majority of influencers, a majority of the people that take up the media space that we consume, this is what we're choosing to put our influence and to put our passion in. Remember how I said that I think the most important things you can equip yourself with are intelligence, passion, and faith in whatever order you see fit. I can guarantee you everything that's happening right now doesn't follow a single one of those ordinances. Brennan Carr, who is the FCC chair, took this very seriously and expressed to Disney and Benny Johnson was very seriously looking into this, that action needed to be taken. And it actually wasn't too long after that Brennan Carr went on Hannity on Fox News and said, quote, "We at the FCC are going to enforce the public interest obligation. If there's broadcasters out there that don't like it, they can turn their license into the FCC, but that's our job, and again, we're making some progress now." Let's talk about the difference between free speech, hate speech, and incorrect speech. Here's my thoughts. That's all the information I'm going to give you on this because, I mean, that's really all there is. But let's go into my thoughts about this. So technically, what Jimmy Kimmel said was incorrect. And that is considered news distortion. What he said about Tyler Robinson is not correct. It's not proven he was affiliated with either party. It's technically wrong. So, and Brennan Carr has made comments about that, saying that it's distorted news. And I consider the situation too. Let's consider this situation too. Jimmy Kimmel's ratings had been steadily going down. It's the same pattern we saw with Stephen Colbert. He was in a $40 million annual deficit. Ratings were way down. And the only thing that kept them circulating is that they made and poked fun at politics. Because nothing else was saving them. They're not natural born entertainers. There is nothing interesting that had piqued the media's news, that had piqued entertainers and other entertainers and viewers' ears in years. So what did they do? They resorted to media jokes. They resorted to political jokes. They resorted to low-hanging fruit because they could not mentally, substantially support themselves on that show or on their own monologues. When was the last time you heard anything about Jimmy Kimmel? Literally, Think about it. When was the last time before this that you heard anything about Jimmy Kimmel? My point exactly. They're not cutting it in the entertainment world. The entertainment world is moving on. They're moving on to a place where Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, Seth Meyers, Jimmy Fallon, they don't have a spot in it because the entertainment that they've been putting out for the past seasons, the past years, are no longer actually true, fun filled, intelligent manifestations of comedy. They are easy, quick, low hanging fruit jabs at politics, media, anything that they can grab at. So it's really not a surprise to me, shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that he was cut. That when you are hanging on by a thread that thin, anything, any force is going to pull you down. And really, if you pay attention to what other late night hosts are saying, they're saying that it's. I know Stephen Colbert said that you can't give him an inch. You can't give American politicians an inch. The current administration can't give them anything, and they're going to take a mile, and they're going to take it all. Says the guy that wasn't making any money for anybody the past however many years. Let's continue on what I was saying about incorrect speech, hate speech, and free speech. I think what he says falls in the ladder, a weird ladder between incorrect speech and free speech. It's an expression of what he thinks, but also where in his contract does it say that he's a political activist? Where in his contract does it say he's anything more than an entertainer? You know what I'm saying? Like I would not say it's hateful. There's definitely more provocative things that have gotten people taken off the air before. I would definitely say it's not the most provocative thing that could have been said. And to think now it's kind of got everybody on their toes. They're not going to get, the FCC isn't going to cut funding from another late night show now. That would cause a revolt. It's. I think the my main thought is if you're already dangling by a thread, people have already kind of forgotten about you, and this is the thing that kind of brings you down. I think that's your sign you need to go out the door. I want to close this conversation with this quote from Johnny Carson. In 1979, he said, quote, "Why do they think just because they have a Tonight Show that you must deal in serious issues? It's a dangerous, it's a danger, it's a real danger once you start that. You start to get that self-important feeling that what you have has great import. And strangely enough, you could use that show as a forum. You could sway people, and I don't think you should as an entertainer." End quote. And that's all I'm going to say about the remainder of the situation. Because it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's so weird to me that more people put more stock into Jimmy Kimmel being taken off the air indefinitely rather than they did someone getting assassinated in broad daylight. Ass backwards to me, but I mean, there's nothing else to say about it. I mean, that's what it is. It's I think it was a sign to broadcasting companies. I think it was a sign to the owners and the developers, Disney in this lens, to get their guys under control. I don't think it's censorship. The View has been on for how many years? It is not political censorship. It is the sense of you're a low hanging fruit entertainer. This might have been what snapped the line. So I think that conversation needs to be stopped sooner rather than later. And it's funny that more people put more emotion into that than a lot of the other things that are happening now. Well, I've done a lot of talking. Been talking for probably over an hour now, but I will revert to my prior statement. And I want to share this actually. So, recently the most recent book I read was actually Bill Clinton's memoir, Citizen: Life After the White House, and this is another thing I think is very important. You can be pretty seated in your beliefs. You can be very confident in who you are in terms of government, but I think it's important to read on both sides, read information from both sides of the scope. and find a reason to understand where they're coming from. I say this coming from both sides of the parties. It's important to put yourself in their shoes in some way, shape, or form and to think about why they're saying what they're saying rather than just basing all of your assumptions about a party off of the what I mentioned, the extremist 2%. Again, it makes up 2% of all voters, of all people, of all things that you're seeing right now. They're the ones that are catching the media's news. I think it's very important to at least subject yourself to it. And if you find that what you were thinking is correct and you are confirming your belief and confirming your opinion, then at least you get to say that the grass is greener on the other side. You get the comfort of saying that with an open, honest lens. Now, I'm not saying going and reading other things and going, "Oh yeah, that's not right. That's not right." Go into it pretty neutral. I think if we all did that, we would see a big, big change on a congressional scale. Looping back, closing thought is so help me God should not just be reserved for the oath of office. It should be everybody all encompassing. It should be anybody that wants a chance of influencing someone, that wants a chance of educating someone, that wants a chance of being seen in any ethical way, faithful way. There needs to be more emphasis on it rather than just the government officials. In recent years, we've separated ourselves, we segregated ourselves from the attainable and the unattainable. And there used to be a time in America where you saw each other as equals, you saw each other as opportunist, and someone on the street could be your biggest ally and you wouldn't even know it. And now we're too afraid to talk to each other. Now we're too afraid to see where the other person's coming from in the slight chance, or now very large chance, that we are called a bigot, that we are called some kind of phobia, some kind of phobe, because we've compartmentalized and clustered everything, and there's really strict but also not strict boundaries to all of them. There's weird little exceptions to every cluster, and we started taking ourselves way too seriously. And what I brought up about reading Bill Clinton's memoir, in the beginning, he tells about the time that he met Neil Armstrong. And it was in the Oval Office, and Neil brought a moon rock from 1969. And after their conversation, Bill goes, "Hey, can I keep that rock?" Neil says, "Sure." So he keeps it on his coffee table in the middle of the Oval Office. So what he would do is anytime conversations would get too serious, get too heated, dignitaries and or senators or world leaders or whoever, he would stop the conversation and say, "You see that rock? See that rock sitting on the coffee table?" They'd probably look at him and be like, "Yeah," and he would say, "That rock is however many years old. It's been here way before we were, and it's going to be here way after we leave." So the message of him saying that is, we're just passing through. Stop taking yourself so seriously. And that was one thing that stuck with me from that whole book. And it was right at the beginning. So that I'll leave you with that. So all of that being said, if you're going to take one thing away from this video, one thing away from this entire hour-long podcast, let it be that you gained a new sense of inquisitiveness, that you gained a new sense of urgency to educate yourself on things that I said today that you maybe agree or don't agree with, don't know a whole lot about. Let that be your sign to start making, as I mentioned at the beginning, let it be your sign to start making factual, individual opinions. Make this your sign to start making everything you put out into the world. Let it be in a basis of information, not ignorance. I could talk for hours about this type of information. What good it would do, it won't be heard unless the major majority sees that they have the potential to do the same thing. And the power of one voice and the power of one message, as we saw with Charlie Kirk, has single-handedly, you know, even prior to his assassination and especially after, has influenced a new section of American politics and has influenced a new area of youth in politics. And it was as tragic as it was, and as vitriolic as America has been, and how unforgiving a good portion of have been in the aftershocks of the assassination, this still serves as a tide shift, as a wake-up call to put your foot in the ring and to be the true, informed, realistic version of yourself, to be a light, a voice, an activist, a figure for someone else to believe in, for someone to find hope in, in areas of their lives that they may be lacking in. And that's my message with this. And I plan continuing further. I plan to make podcast episodes that revolve around current events and revolve around American politics and American media. That's the shift I want to take with this podcast, and I will. That is where the need lies. I believe in putting yourself where need is, and if where you're currently situated is just out of view of that, shift over a little bit. It never hurts to try a new avenue, and it never hurts to educate yourself on something different. It just makes you that much more valuable and that much more competitive. And the it can only help you achieve those three cornerstones of passion, faith, and intellect. So I'm going to leave you with that. And I would love to hear what you have to say, either in relation to what I said or the direction that I want to take with this podcast. America is in a very trying time right now. So is the remainder of the world. And has been. But as an American citizen, you owe it to your country. These things are happening in your backyard. You need to put your country first. You need to understand what's going on in your country before you can worry about solving worldly issues. America is crumbling right now, and I urge you to follow what's going on in state politics, what's on in federal politics. I think this is a good time for, if you're not involved, if you're not keeping up with the government, start at a state level and work up. This is your sign. This is your sign to educate yourself. So I am going to leave it there. That is the real end. Thank you for listening if you've made it this far. It's a lot to talk about. It's a lot of heavy information to talk about. But that's all I have to say. And thank you for watching and listening. I appreciate you for staying. Follow me where I've said before. This isn't really the time that I feel like I should be self-promoting. It's more of a time that you should be self-educating. If you feel so inclined, they will be attached in the description of either the YouTube video or the Spotify audio version. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate you all, and I will talk to you later. Take care.